Hello. Well, first I wanted to apologize for not putting out a video in a couple weeks. This week we went through Tropical Storm Dante and lost power for a day and lost water for 4 days, and there's been a lot of construction going on to fix things, so it's been noisy. So anyway, and I also wanted to do something different. I wanted to talk about COVID-19. Like everybody, I'm interested in that. And as a scientist, I'm interested in logical scientific analysis. And one of the big questions that's been in the news, particularly the last couple of weeks, is what's the origin? And I wanted to do a video because there's one question that doesn't seem to be asked or isn't being discussed. And that's, how do you do the connection between the origin of the virus, where it was located, to where the infection occurred in Wuhan? Because the samples that the Wuhan Institute of Virology took, that are the closest match, were from a region called Mojiang in Yunnan province. And that is a 1,800 kilometer drive away from Wuhan, about 20 hours. That's 1,100 miles for those who speak in miles. And so that's a long way. So we have a case where the closest virus we know to date is from a long way away from where the main disease outbreak started. And they've done an analysis of the outbreak. And the outbreak was centered in a region of the city of Wuhan, near the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and also where the wet market was that was initially considered before we found out that there were cases preceding the wet market infections. So I wanted to ask the questions, well, how did it get from here to there, and what's the evidence? And so, number one, or A, we could have a bat that travels to Wuhan somehow. Either flies slowly, ends up in a cave, hitches a ride in a truck, however the bat travels naturally. And then the bat could infect an animal, which could infect a human, or the bat could infect a human, and then that could be our first human case 0. Now B, we have a case where a bat could infect an animal, and then the animal can travel or be transported to Wuhan, where the animal infects a human, and we have a case 0. And then C, we could have a bat infect an animal, which infects a human, and then the human travels to Wuhan. And D, we have a bat infects a human directly without an animal host, and then the human travels to Wuhan. And the problem with A through D in all cases is, why wasn't there any cases in Yunnan province? And actually there were. Back in 2012, 6 people entered a mine, 3 died, and it's believed that it was a coronavirus that's similar to this, but we don't know for certain because the details of that virus haven't been released. So it is possible that there was an earlier case in Yunnan, and that was the origin of the virus. And this is really important in terms of the Chinese government trying to claim that the virus started in a totally different country. Some spokespeople have said it started in the U.S., some have said it started in Indonesia, some Italy or elsewhere in Europe. And the problem with that is that all the evidence points to these caves outside in Yunnan province near Mojiang. So you either have to have a totally different bat population, likely, that develops a nearly identical virus, but separately in a different part of the world, or you would have to have the virus travel from there and travel to another country and then make its way back. And both of those are highly unlikely scenarios. And so when the Chinese government says, oh, it's not our fault, well, they don't deal with this question. I mean, the virus itself originated in China. So even if you claim that the infections originated somewhere else and spread before it spread from Wuhan, then you still have to deal with this question. Where did it originate from? And there's no evidence of any other pool of coronaviruses that are closer matched to COVID-19 than what we know from Yunnan province that Wuhan Institute of Virology collected. So then going back to it, we have E, a bat, lives in a cave in Mojiang. Wuhan Institute of Virology goes there, collects samples, and they take it back to Wuhan, and then you get a person infected somehow. And F, we could have, and this is at the suggestion of Dr. Fauci, who claimed that if there's gain-of-function research, it had to be Barrick. Well, that's Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina. So that opens up the possibility, which the Chinese have also posited, that the sample was collected by the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They sent it to the U.S. The U.S. modified it and sent it back, and then people got infected. And I don't really believe that. And Dr. Barrick has recently signed on to a letter saying that there needs to be a thorough investigation. And if he was in the middle of it, and he or his team had worked on modifying the virus, I would think that we would already know that. Maybe not, maybe he's part of some cover-up, but I think we would know that if he was. And then G is one that I just heard about today, watching Wangyun News, an Indian news outlet. And they had video that was released December 10th, 2019, so about the time the first cases, and it was from the Hubei CDC, was collecting virus samples in caves with bats. And they collected over 300 samples. And they showed workers in Tibet coveralls with hoods wearing just surgical masks to keep from inhaling too many of the virus particles. And so it's possible that they got infected in this process of collecting virus particles in the Wuhan area, and perhaps that was the start of the outbreak. And that's something we don't know about because the Chinese government's not putting out information about it. So these are various scenarios. And the thing is, there's no known host animals still. And in the case of SARS and MERS, those were, in both cases, known within 9 months. So we would think that we would have identified a host animal, or the Chinese government and bureaucracy would have, but they haven't. And there hasn't been a human host zero, a patient zero, identified either. There have been a couple that have been talked about. Currently, there was a person infected December 8th, but most scientists don't think that was the original infection, that there were earlier ones. And now we find out that there's reports that 3 people from the Wuhan Institute of Virology were sick with a similar disease. There's also a report that the wife of another worker at the Wuhan Institute of Virology died from a disease. There's a report that one worker at WIV may be patient 0. Her name is Wangyun Ling, and she disappeared. And they deleted her off the website and said, oh, she stopped working here in 2015, even though there's a picture being circulated of her with her co-workers from 2018. And she still hasn't been found. It's presumed that she died. If she was around, then it would be a simple matter, hopefully, for the Chinese government to present her and make some statement saying that she was never infected. But that hasn't occurred. So we have a case where the only path we know where everything occurred in a way that we would call scientific evidence is the path where the Wuhan Institute of Virology collected virus samples. They initially collected over 30 samples, took them back to the lab, and this is in 2012 time frame that we know of. And by 2013, they were doing experiments with viruses that have been modified to attack the human ACE2 receptor, and they had human modified mice with humanized ACE2 receptors that they could do experiments with. So they were already doing gain of function research in 2012 and 2013 and publishing in the journal Nature. And in 2015, they again published in the journal Nature doing gain of function research with natural wild virus, as they called it, virus that had been modified to attack the human ACE2 receptor, and also a chimera virus that they had produced. And this gain of function research from 2015 was acknowledged that they were working past the point that the U.S. had banned the gain of function research, but NIH had given approval for them to continue the research past the ban into 2015 when that paper was published in Nature. And so that brings about the question with Dr. Fauci banning that there was gain of function, or denying there was gain of function research. He either didn't know and is not a real good manager, or he knew and he's lying to us. And you add that to what we know about what's happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's the only path. E is the only path where we have evidence, a chain of evidence that goes all the way from bats to collection of a virus to having a virus that can attack the human ACE2 receptors and have it attack patients who then spread it to the public. It's the only chain where we have evidence for each step of it. Now that doesn't mean that we're not going to have evidence that at some point a host animal doesn't turn up. But it's looking more and more like we really have a case of a lab outbreak, in my estimation. And the Dr. Fauci emails that just came out even seem more so, where even Christian Anderson admitted in January 31st email that there was 0.1% of the virus that looks like it was man-made. And he said that it's unlikely to have occurred due to natural causes. But then he turned around 3 or 4 days later and was saying that the lab leak hypothesis was a conspiracy theory. Of course, he's trying to protect his industry, and that I understand. After Chernobyl, I told people that that wouldn't happen again, that the Russian designers and managers were incompetent in the way that they designed the power plant, and that other power plants were much more robust. And then Fukushima happened. So here we have things happening, and when you're part of an industry, you want to think that your industry has accounted for all possible problems, but we can't. We're humans. We're going to miss things. Things are going to happen that we don't have control over. So some things that are too dangerous, like a virus, and some things related to nuclear power. I'm still a believer in nuclear power, but there's certainly some implementations that might be too dangerous. We shouldn't be doing gain-of-function research like this if we can't control it. So those are my thoughts. And like I said, I felt like doing something a little bit different as a one-off. and occasionally I'll do something like this. And so I hope you like it, and if you do, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll try to get back to a physics video on my next one. So thanks for watching.